Hello. This video is one of a series on the changes in the new laws, specifically discussing Law 23, which is a comparable call. I'm Doug Grove. I'm a tournament director. With me is Matt Smith, who is a tournament director and also a member of the ACBL Laws Commission. So Matt, this is an entirely new law in the code. What is its general purpose?
Well, its purpose, the purpose of the framers of the laws over the years, and particularly with this issue of the laws, is to come up with rectifications that more frequently achieve equity instead of applying arbitrary penalties that distort the outcome of a board. Law 23 is a big step in that direction. The concept of it isn't really new. In the previous versions, insufficient bid Law 27, they permitted, insufficient bids were permitted to be changed without penalty as long as the substituted call had the same or a more precise meaning than the insufficient bid, even if it wasn't the same denomination. This law doesn't work exactly the same way. The phrasing's a little different, the definitions are a little different, but that idea has been expanded into other laws in this version of the book.
Okay, so let's help clarify then what the exact definition of a comparable call has become in the new code.
Okay, it's more precise than it was the one that was used for insufficient bids, and it will apply to insufficient bids as well these days. The definition of a comparable call is the call has the same or similar meaning as the withdrawn call, or the call defines a subset of the possible meanings of the withdrawn call, or the call has the same purpose, for example, as an asking bid or a relay as the withdrawn call.
Okay, each of these three conditions or criteria that have to be met, we will deal with in a separate video, but I'd like to spend a little more time talking about the general instances of what our TD's proper procedure should be in situations where this law might apply.
Well, what the director has to do is they have to find out what happened. So, and in doing so, try not to give too much information to the table. So the normal procedure is the director would take the person who made the call out of rotation away from the table and find out what was going on in their mind for the purposes of making this ruling correctly. Sometimes the meaning of the offending call will be obvious, sometimes it won't. Sometimes the director will need to ask some questions about it. The director's job is to gather two pieces of information. Determine what the player in question thought was going on when he made his call out of rotation. And then you need to know what he thought his bid showed. You need to know that because you're going to need to apply that to the determination of whether a comparable call is available or not.
So you're describing a process that requires some TD judgment as they've gathered all this information. Do you have a guideline for us on the overall principle of how we should be dealing with this information we gather?
Well, the overriding principle is that if it's quite clear that there's little or no information available to partner from the withdrawn call that is not also in the proposed comparable call, that the TD should allow the auction to proceed without rectification as specified in the applicable law that Law 23 is applying to.
Okay, so you mentioned the fact that the substituted call that we're allowing to be comparable may not be exactly the same, and we'll cover that in some examples. If that occurs, what do we do with the information, the extra information that, even though we think it's small, might be out there?
What we do with that is, once we go down the road of determining that it's a comparable call, Law 16, unauthorized information, doesn't apply anymore. Law 16 applies as far as these changes are made only as far as the partner of the person who made the illegal call at their first choice is free to do what they want, except they have unauthorized information from their partner's action. They're not allowed to use that. Once they make their call, and once the partner makes what we consider a comparable call, then we let the auction and play continue, and there is a Law 23C is available to adjust at the end of the hand, but we don't intervene once we've made intervene until the end of play if we've determined that a comparable call was available.
Well, let me just
Okay, I'm sorry.
let me just ask to make sure I understand what you're saying here. When a call that's an infraction out of rotation in particular occurs, and partner has to make a call before we get to
Right.
making a comparable call, unauthorized information still could apply.
That's true. Unauthorized information does apply to that one call. That's before the comparable call has been made.
And once the comparable call has been made,
Law 16C, unauthorized information, does not apply. For example, we don't examine each call the partner makes throughout the auction or even the play to determine if logical alternatives existed. That's not an issue. They get to do whatever they think is right, and we have in reserve Law 23C, which says that if we, at the end of the day, we think they achieved a better result than they might have with assistance from the infraction, we're expected to adjust the score then. Not just because they got a lucky result. It has to be directly related to some piece of information from the withdrawn call, the infraction, that assisted them in getting a better score than they might have otherwise.
so even if they got to a normal result by a perhaps not normal route, if there is not a connection with the information of the call, there would be no reason to apply.
Right. There needs to be a link. If a pair achieves a spectacularly good result after us allowing a comparable call, we don't just adjust the score. We need to see, there was some bit of information in the withdrawn call that maybe we didn't see at the time we allowed the withdrawn call. And I'm not saying we were wrong to allow the withdrawn call, but there was some bit of information in there that we didn't at first see, or we didn't see how the auction would play out or what decisions would be important later. But at the end of the hand, we realized there was some little bit of information that gave an assist to the partner. If that's the case, that's when we're supposed to adjust the score. And
So-
it's not the same standard as unauthorized information in making that determination. We're even allowed and expected, if it's maybe this would have happened, maybe that would have happened, a weighted score is perfectly appropriate in those cases.
Okay, so by having 23C in reserve, it allows us to apply the overriding principle of trying to get an untainted auction when we can.
That's the goal of this law, to get more bridge played and fewer random results as a result of arbitrary penalties in the laws. Yes.
To clarify one other thing there, when we choose that a comparable call has occurred, and so rule, are there lead penalties potentially if the
No.
person who has withdrawn a call is on lead or his partner is on lead?
No, once we decide that a call is comparable, Law 26 lead penalties do not apply if they end up being on the defending side.
The old laws did have a Law 23, of course. It was awareness of potential damage. Has that all gone away, or what's the story there?
No, that law still exists. It's just been moved to a different spot in the law book. It's now Law 72C, and it has the same meaning as it did in prior versions of the laws. It's just been reordered and put in a different spot.
Thank you for watching. As I said, we have separate videos on specific aspects of this law with examples, and we encourage you to view those as well.
Thanks, Doug.